Rivers Solomon is a queer black American author who is pushing the boundaries of a multitude of different genres. They currently live in the UK, which means I was lucky enough to get my copy of Sorrowland signed when Rivers Solomon led a panel discussion between Alison Rumfitt and Julia Armfield, authors of Tell Me I'm Worthless and Our Wives Under the Sea, two of my favourite books of the last few years. It was an incredible panel, incredible discussion, and all three of these people are amazing to listen to. Sorrowland is a piece of American Gothic fiction, and I love Gothic fiction, it's my favourite genre, but it's also incredibly political and it is, again, as I already said, pushing boundaries when it comes to genre. But what really got me excited was a piece on the blurb written by Roxane Gay. Sorrowland is gorgeous, and the writing, the storytelling are magnificent. This country has a dark history of what it's willing to do to black bodies, and Rivers Solomon lays that truth bare in a most unexpected, absolutely brilliant way. And I thought that was so fascinating. I kept that in mind as I was reading because the book begins with a young black woman, a girl, she's only about 15, 16 years old, and she has escaped from a cult commune. When we meet her, she is in the forest, heavily pregnant, on the run, she's escaped from this commune, and you learn a little bit about the commune as she describes her life and her backstory, and then gives birth to twins, by herself, alone in the forest. Vern is a black albino girl who has grown up in this commune and was married to its leader. The commune began its life as a black civil rights group, and then it sort of mutated into this cult commune place. And I thought that that was fascinating to begin with because I'd never seen anything of that perspective before. I thought this is a fascinating angle, where is this going to go? And then, keeping in mind what Roxane Gay said about the US having a dark history of what it's willing to do to black bodies, I thought that feels like a very subtle insight into where this story is going, so I kept it in mind as I read. What begins as a story about a black commune that rejects whiteness, rejects Americanisms, rejects Western society, is somehow going to lead us to a narrative about what the US does to black people and black bodies specifically. And I thought that that choice, that word bodies, there was so much in what Roxane Gay was saying. And I thought, this is going to take me on a wild and disturbing and frightening ride. And it did. It's very difficult to talk about Sorrowland and where it goes, because there are spoilers layered upon spoilers, layered upon spoilers. It's a novel separated into three distinct acts. In the first act, Vern has run away from this commune. She is a young girl who has just given birth all alone, and she's being hunted by someone. Someone from the commune is chasing her, and at the beginning, this person is stringing up the bodies of animals that they have killed from the trees in a bid to terrify Vern. And she's being hunted, and eventually she comes to a bar or something, and there are motorbikes outside, and she meets this woman called Ollie, who kind of takes care of her, and the two of them get into a rapport and kind of a romantic relationship for a while, and then there's a twist, which I don't want to talk about, even though it's very, very early on in the first act. In the second act, eventually, Vern meets two Native American people, and again, enters a kind of friendship and then romantic relationship with one of them. But again, I can't really talk about it. But all the while, as we go through the book, we are learning more and more about Vern, about her backstory, about the fact that she was married to this cult leader, and what the cult is, and what it was, and what it should have been, and what it wasn't, and why it is the way that it is. What's very, very interesting is that so early on, Vern tells us, and has a conversation with Ollie, about the fact that this commune was never investigated by the government. Now, the commune itself is typically referred to as Caneland, and it's pretty famous within the context of the novel. All across the US, people have heard of Caneland, and the name comes from Cain, son of Adam and Eve. The commune believes that Cain is the true god of African-born or African heritage people, and Cain represents their separation from Christian whiteness. And this foundation then creates what the Cainites believe in, how they worship, how they function, how they behave within this commune. And they are breaking a lot of laws in the US. They are breaking very, very fundamental rules, ethical and legal ones. And yet they don't get investigated. In fact, Vern remarks on the fact that the police know about them, the police visit them, and the FBI knows about them, and nothing happens. Why? Especially considering this is an all-black cult, which the police would take great pleasure in dismantling, but they don't. And you have to wonder why. And again, I went back to what Roxane Gay said about what the US is willing to do to black bodies. And I started to think, is this cult led by the leader we think it's led by? And that was my thought pretty early on, and I won't tell you because some of my thoughts and suspicions turn out to be correct. But still, what's really going on goes even further than I suspected. This is a novel about queerness, it's a novel about blackness, it's a novel about Native Americans, and the fact that all of these three disparate groups are united by their enemy, white Americanism. The way that the US culture, government, economic system, all of it is supported by white Christian conservatism. Is it conservatism or conservatism? Should look that up. The shit thing. White Christian conservatism fundamentally destroys the lives of Native Americans, black people, queer people, etc. And this is a novel that examines all of that in ways that I just didn't expect. Now, I said that it's a Gothic novel, and it is, in the sense that it's about fear, and it's about terror, and it's about the unknown, and it's incredibly claustrophobic. It's a novel that is mostly set in the wilderness, in places far removed from cities. You've got a cult, you've got a commune, you've got a big forest, and you've got small dwellings within that forest. So there are a multitude of places that we kind of get to visit through the novel, but they're all cramped and compact and isolated. And so that Gothic atmosphere remains all the way through the novel, even as we move from place to place. We also have a very, very small cast of characters, and we're focusing in on Vern. Now, what's also interesting about Vern is the fact that she's developing superpowers. She's developing strength and endurance. There's a bit where she and her children walk for days upon days upon days, and she's carrying them, and she just doesn't stop. So she's developing some sort of power, and she believes perhaps she was being poisoned in the cult, that the cult was poisoning her with something that allowed her to develop these powers. And then when someone that she meets figures out what the thing is that's causing these powers, you turn cold. I feel like I've given you enough pieces to intrigue you, and I don't want to spoil anything else, but there's so much going on. And yet this is also a very slow burn. This is a 350-page novel that took me about 3 days to read, and it does move slowly. Really, really slowly, but in a very gratifying way. It takes its time to examine its themes and its ideas and its politics and its characters and their relationships to one another, especially Vern and her children. I am not an expert, by the way, in anything that I've just said. Everything that I'm talking about here is secondhand knowledge from books I've read, people I've talked to, films I've watched, etc. I'm trying my best to learn as much as possible about the United States, its history, its relationship to black people, to black bodies, as Roxane Gay said, to Native Americans, and to queer people like myself. It's very, very easy for me to say something wrong, to misinterpret something, to get the wrong end of the stick, to even say something offensive. And so I'm trying to be very, very careful and only relate the things that I've kind of learned or pieced together, because I am not American. I have spent very little time in the US. I'm also not black, I'm not Native American, I am an ordinary white British person. So what I want to do here is just communicate to you that if you are also just an ordinary white person, part of the majority, this is a really, really valuable tool to get you angry, to get you understanding, to get you seeing a different perspective. The whole point of this channel, the point of my website, the point of Books and Bow, is to read and get other people to read diverse literature. Literature that teaches us other perspectives. The perspectives of queer people, of black people, of people from other disparate cultures, countries, histories, etc. This is a great example of exactly that. This is a book that teaches you so much about queerness, blackness, and Native Americans, all smushed together and, as I said, kind of united by their enemy. An enemy is a strong word, but it's the word that came to mind. You will learn so much from Sorrowland, all the while being pretty entertained by this genre-bending, gothic, sci-fi, speculative, literary novel. There is so much value to this book. But Sorrowland is also not an easy read. It's difficult, it's frightening, it's intimidating, but that's necessary. For change, we have to learn uncomfortable things, we have to read uncomfortable things, and that's what Sorrowland is, that's what it provides. There's a lot that I haven't said about the book because I can't. It is, as I said, just a series of spoilers and twists. And that is wonderful because it keeps you reading through what I would call a slow burn in a very satisfying way. This is not a slow burn in any negative sense. It really takes its time to deliver its ideas, its themes, its characters, its message. And it gets you thinking about a lot of things, specifically relationships between different groups. Absolutely fascinating stuff. Rivers Solomon is like no other author out there. They are doing incredible things with genre, with politics, with their themes, and all of the history that they have learned and experienced all smushed together into an incredibly angry and yet somehow uplifting novel. It's wonderful. Sorrowland is an incredible novel. Please check it out and subscribe for books.